Commander Vex-9 adjusted his three eyes, each blinking in sequence as he stared at the holographic display floating before him. The war room aboard the Galactic Federation flagship Nexus Prime buzzed with nervous energy. 27 different species sat around the curved table, their various appendages tapping, clicking, and vibrating with anxiety. "So, let me get this straight," Vex-9 began, his voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that could melt hull plating. "We've been fighting these humans for 6 months now, and we still don't understand how they keep winning." Admiral Korth 12, a slug-like being with translucent skin, oozed forward in his mobility chair. "Commander, the data is troubling. These humans seem to possess capabilities that defy our understanding of biological limitations." "Oh, wonderful," Vex-9 muttered, pressing a button that brought up recent battle footage. "Another species that thinks they're special." The hologram flickered to life, showing the recent engagement at Tau Centauri. Federation forces, numbering in the thousands, faced off against a human fleet that was outnumbered 10-1. Standard protocol. Should have been a massacre, should have been over in minutes. Instead, they watched their own ships getting systematically dismantled. "Analysis report," Lieutenant QX, Vex-9 ordered, not bothering to hide his irritation. Lieutenant Kix, a being that resembled a walking crystal formation, cleared what passed for his throat. "Sir, the humans employed tactics that are statistically impossible. They anticipated our movements with 97% accuracy. Their reaction times exceeded our calculations by a factor of 12. 12? Captain Zola 8 spoke up from across the room, her forearms gesturing wildly. "That's not possible. No organic species can process information that quickly." The footage continued playing. Human ships danced between Federation artillery like they were reading their opponents' minds. The energy beams that should have vaporized their vessels seemed to barely scratch their hulls. "Maybe they're using some kind of advanced AI," suggested Major Blykes, his tentacles curling nervously around his data pad. Vex-9 snorted, a sound that came out as a wet whistle through his breathing apparatus. If they had AI that advanced, why would they still be using biological pilots? No, there's something else going on here. The recording shifted to a particularly brutal moment. A human fighter, call sign Raven 7, was surrounded by 15 Federation interceptors. Any rational being would have surrendered. Instead, the human pilot did something that made the entire war room fall silent. The small human ship suddenly accelerated at a rate that should have turned its pilot into organic paste. It spun in 3 dimensions simultaneously, firing weapons with impossible precision while maintaining a flight path that seemed to violate several laws of physics. In less than 30 seconds, all 15 Federation ships were debris. "By the 7 moons of Arcturus," whispered Science Officer Trin 4. "How is that pilot still conscious, let alone alive?" "That's what we need to figure out," Vex-9 replied grimly. "Because if we can't, this war is going to be very short and very embarrassing." The war room's doors hissed open, interrupting the tense atmosphere. In walked Cadet Elena Vasquez, a recent graduate from the Federation's xenobiology program. She was young, eager, and had that annoying habit of asking questions that made everyone else feel uncomfortable. "Sorry I'm late, Commander," Elena said, slightly out of breath. "I was reviewing the latest intelligence reports from the human homeworld." "Perfect timing," Cadet Vex-9 said dryly. "We were just trying to figure out how these humans are defying the basic laws of biology and physics. Care to enlighten us?" Elena approached the hologram, studying the footage with intense concentration. Her brow furrowed as she watched the impossible maneuvers, the superhuman reaction times, the way human pilots seemed to shrug off gravitational forces that would kill any other species. "Sir, have you considered that maybe they're not defying anything?" Elena said slowly. The room erupted in confused chatter. Vex-9 raised a primary appendage for silence. "Explain. What if humans are just built differently than we assumed?" Elena continued, her voice gaining confidence. What if what we're seeing isn't impossible for them, but normal? Major Blex's tentacles twitched with agitation. Cadet, with all due respect, we've studied thousands of species. There are biological limits that cannot be exceeded without technological augmentation. Are there? Elena challenged. How much do we actually know about human physiology under extreme stress? Our intelligence gathering has been focused on their technology, their weapons, their ships. But what about their bodies? Vex-9 found himself intrigued despite his skepticism. Continue. Elena gestured at the hologram. Look at this footage again, but this time don't think about what's impossible. Think about what would be necessary for a species to survive on their homeworld. She manipulated the display, zooming in on the human fighter performing its impossible dance of death. Earth has a gravity of 1.0 standard units. That's 30% higher than Federation average. Their atmosphere is 21% oxygen. That's nearly twice our optimal levels. Their planet experiences regular catastrophic weather events, seismic activity, and has a magnetic field that's constantly bombarding them with radiation. The room grew quiet as the implications sank in. You're suggesting, Captain Zola 8 said slowly, that humans evolved in an environment so hostile that what we consider impossible is merely Tuesday for them. Exactly. Elena exclaimed. Think about it. A species that evolved on a high-gravity, high-oxygen, radiation-soaked death world would need incredible physical resilience just to survive. What we're seeing in combat might just be humans operating within their normal parameters. Lieutenant Keeks flickered with what might have been confusion. But the G-forces those pilots are experiencing should cause immediate unconsciousness, followed by death. Should they? Elena asked. Or is that just what would happen to us? Humans have something called an adrenaline response. It's a biological system that floods their bodies with performance-enhancing chemicals during stress. It can increase their strength, speed, and pain tolerance by orders of magnitude. Admiral Korth 12's translucent skin rippled with thought. You're saying they're naturally enhanced? I'm saying they might be the universe's idea of a joke, Elena replied with a slight smile. A species so ridiculously over-engineered for survival that when they finally make it to space, everyone else looks like they're moving in slow motion. The footage continued playing, but now the room watched with a different perspective. The impossible maneuvers suddenly seemed less impossible and more inevitable. If you took a species designed for survival on a hostile world and gave them access to space-age technology, this might be exactly what you'd get. There's something else, Elena added, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. I've been analyzing their communication patterns during battle. They're not just reacting to our tactics. They're enjoying this. Enjoying combat? Major Blex's tentacles recoiled in horror. Their stress hormones spike during engagement, but not in the way we'd expect. They're getting what they call an adrenaline rush. Combat actually makes them perform better, not worse. They're literally built for war. Vex-9 stared at the hologram, watching human pilots perform feats that should be impossible, but now seemed horribly, terrifyingly logical. So what you're telling me, Cadet, is that we're not fighting an advanced technological civilization. We're fighting a species of natural-born super soldiers who think war is fun. That's one way to put it, sir. The room fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines and the occasional nervous clicking of claws on metal. The implications were staggering. The Federation had built their entire military doctrine around the assumption that all species had roughly similar biological limitations. They'd been preparing for a chess match and walked into a boxing ring against opponents who thought getting punched was entertaining. Sir, Communications Officer Yix 3 suddenly spoke up, her antenna twitching with urgency. I'm receiving a transmission from the human fleet. On screen, Vex-9 ordered, grateful for the distraction from the existential crisis Elena had just handed them. The hologram shifted to show a human face, pale, middle-aged, with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He wore what appeared to be a casual military uniform and was smiling in a way that somehow managed to be both friendly and terrifying. "Greetings, Federation forces," the human said in accented but clear galactic standard. "This is Admiral Jack Harrison of the Terran Defense Fleet. I hope everyone over there is having a good day." The casual tone sent chills through the assembled officers. This human had just finished destroying a significant portion of their fleet and was talking like he was inviting them over for dinner. "I wanted to reach out because we've noticed some confusion in your tactical responses," Admiral Harrison continued. "It seems like you might not fully understand what you're dealing with here, so I thought it might be helpful to have a little chat." Vex-9 activated the communication system. "Admiral Harrison, this is Commander Vex-9 of the Federation Fleet. We appreciate your concern for our understanding." The human's smile widened. "Oh, good. I was hoping we could talk. You see, Commander, we've been monitoring your communications, and it seems like you think we're cheating somehow, using some kind of advanced technology or secret weapons." "The thought had occurred to us," Vex-9 replied dryly. "Well, I'm here to tell you that you're both right and completely wrong," Harrison said, his tone remaining conversationally light, despite the subject matter. "We're not using any technology you can't scan and analyze. But you are missing something pretty fundamental about humans." Alina stepped forward, unable to contain her curiosity. "What are we missing?" Harrison's eyes focused on her, and his smile became genuinely warm. "Ah, someone with the right questions. What you're missing, young lady, is that everything you just saw us do. That's not us at our best. That's us on a Tuesday afternoon after a light lunch." The war room's collective intake of breath was audible. "You see," Harrison continued, "Earth is what you might call a Class 12 death world. Most species need environmental suits just to visit our planet safely. We call it home. We evolved there. Every human you've encountered in combat is operating in an environment that's basically a vacation compared to what we grew up in." Vex-9 felt something that might have been despair creeping into his consciousness. "What exactly are you saying, Admiral?" "I'm saying that if you want to understand humans, you need to stop thinking of us as just another species with fancy technology. Start thinking of us as what happens when evolution spends 4 billion years trying to create the perfect survivor. And then gets bored and decides to see what happens when it gives that survivor opposable thumbs and a sense of humor." The communication feed showed Harrison leaning back in his chair, completely relaxed despite being in the middle of a war zone. "Oh, and Commander? That footage you've been analyzing. The pilot in the fighter marked Raven 7? Every eye in the war room turned to the frozen image of the impossible combat maneuver. "Yeah, that was me out there." The communication cut off, leaving the Federation war room in stunned silence. Elena looked around at the shocked faces of her superior officers and couldn't help but smile. "Well," she said quietly, "I think we're going to need a new strategy." The silence in the war room stretched for exactly 14 seconds before chaos erupted. Officers began shouting in 17 different languages, their various appendages flailing with panic. Admiral Korth 12's translucent skin turned an alarming shade of purple, while Major Blix's tentacles tied themselves into what could only be described as anxiety knots. "Order, order." Vex-9 bellowed, slamming his primary fist on the table. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. "Everyone shut up and let me think." But thinking was proving difficult when faced with the reality that they'd been fighting a species that considered interstellar warfare to be light exercise. The implications were staggering, terrifying, and somehow darkly amusing all at once. Captain Zola 8 was the first to break the renewed silence. "So, let me understand this correctly. We've been at war for 6 months with a species that thinks combat is recreational activity." "It appears so," Elena confirmed, still studying the tactical displays. "And from what I can gather from their communications, they're actually being polite about it." "Polite?" Lieutenant Keeks's crystalline form flickered with confusion. How is systematic destruction of our fleets considered polite? Elena pulled up another set of data on her personal display. They've been using non-lethal takedown methods wherever possible. Look at these statistics. 67% of our damaged ships were disabled, not destroyed. Their targeting has been focused on engines and weapons systems, not crew quarters. The numbers hung in the air like an accusation. The Federation had been throwing everything they had at the humans, while the humans had been playing with kid gloves. "They're toying with us," whispered Science Officer Trin 4. "Like a predator, playing with wounded prey before the kill." "No," Elena said firmly. "I don't think that's it at all. I think they're trying to minimize casualties while still achieving their objectives." Which raises a very important question: what exactly do they want? Before anyone could answer, the communication system crackled to life again. Admiral Harrison's face reappeared on the hologram, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stood several other humans in military uniforms, all looking remarkably calm for beings in the middle of a war. "Sorry to interrupt again," Commander Harrison said with that same unsettling, friendly tone. "But I realized I might have left you with some misconceptions, and that wouldn't be very neighborly of us." Vex-9 activated his microphone with what might have been resignation. "By all means, Admiral, please feel free to completely destroy what's left of our understanding of reality." Harrison laughed, and the sound was surprisingly warm. "Oh, I like you, Commander. You've got a sense of humor." "That's good, because what I'm about to tell you might seem pretty funny from your perspective." A human female stepped forward, her insignia indicating high rank. She had short brown hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "I'm General Maria Santos, Terran Strategic Command. Admiral Harrison asked me to explain our actual position in this conflict." "Your position?" Admiral Korth 12 oozed forward in his chair. "You mean besides winning decisively?" "Well, yes," General Santos replied. "You see, from our perspective, this hasn't really been a war. It's been more of a misunderstanding with violent overtones." The war room erupted again, but Vex-9 quickly restored order. "Explain." 6 months ago, your forces attacked our mining operation in the Kepler system," Santos continued. "We assumed it was a mistake. Different species, different communication protocols, bound to happen eventually. So we defended ourselves and tried to establish contact." Elena felt a cold realization creeping over her from the Battle of Kepler Prime. "Our records show it as a preemptive strike against an unknown aggressive species." "Aggressive?" Harrison looked genuinely surprised. "We were mining asteroids. The most aggressive thing we'd done was blow up some rocks." "Your ships fired first," Major Blykes protested, his tentacles writhing with indignation. "After you opened fire on our civilian miners," Santos replied calmly. "Our escort ships returned fire to protect the mining vessels. Standard defensive protocol." The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Elena accessed the original incident reports, cross-referencing them with the new information. "Oh no, oh no, 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 no." "What is it, Cadet?" Vex-9 demanded. Elena's face had gone pale. "Sir, I think we started this war by accident. Our first contact protocols classified the human mining operation as a potential threat based on their ship designs and energy signatures. The automated systems recommended preemptive action." "Automated systems?" General Santos raised an eyebrow. "You started a war because a computer told you to." The embarrassment in the room was thick enough to breathe. 6 months of casualties, destroyed ships and damaged pride, all because of a software glitch and species misunderstanding. "So," Admiral Harrison said, leaning forward with that perpetual smile, "we've been trying to figure out how to end this little mix-up without too much hurt feelings on either side. The problem is, every time we try to de-escalate, you folks escalate right back up again." Captain Zola 8 found her voice. "We've been escalating because you keep winning. How are we supposed to negotiate from a position of strength when you make our best efforts look like children playing with toys?" Harrison nodded knowingly. And there's the real problem. You think this is about winning and losing. For us, this is about making sure nobody gets hurt unnecessarily while we sort out the confusion. Nobody gets hurt. Lieutenant Keeks flickered with disbelief. You've destroyed hundreds of our ships. Disabled, Santos corrected gently. We've disabled hundreds of your ships. Your casualty rates are actually remarkably low for a conflict of this scale. We've been working very hard to keep it that way. Elena was frantically cross-referencing casualty reports. The numbers were almost unbelievable. In 6 months of warfare, Federation losses were primarily material. Personnel casualties were less than 3% of normal projections for a conflict of this magnitude. You've been fighting a war while trying to keep us alive, she said in wonder. It's not really fighting from our perspective, Admiral Harrison replied. More like energetic disagreement with explosive punctuation marks. Despite everything, Vex-9 found himself almost admiring these humans. They'd been accidentally dragged into a war, had been systematically winning every engagement, and had somehow managed to do it while minimizing casualties among their enemies. It was either the most elaborate psychological warfare campaign in galactic history, or these humans were genuinely trying to be decent about the whole mess. So what happens now? He asked. General Santos exchanged glances with Harrison before answering. Well, that depends on you. We'd prefer to go back to mining asteroids and trading with friendly neighbors. But if you insist on continuing this misunderstanding, we're prepared to keep defending ourselves. Defending yourselves while simultaneously demonstrating that you could wipe us out whenever you choose, Admiral Korth 12 observed. Pretty much, yeah, Harrison agreed cheerfully. Though I should mention that what you've seen so far is just our regular military units doing their jobs. If you really want to escalate things, we have some folks back home who make our current forces look like the junior varsity team. The threat was delivered with such casual friendliness that it took a moment for the full implications to sink in. These humans, who had been effortlessly defeating Federation forces while barely trying, were not their best fighters. Elena stepped forward, her scientific mind racing with possibilities. Admiral Harrison, may I ask you something? Of course, young lady. When you said that was you in the fighter footage performing those maneuvers, was that difficult for you? Harrison's smile became almost embarrassed. Well, I haven't been in a single-seat fighter for about 5 years. I'm more of an administrator these days, so I was a little rusty. Probably wasn't my best flying. The war room fell silent again. The impossible maneuvers that had defied their understanding of physics and biology had been performed by a rusty administrator who thought he was having an off day. This is insane, whispered Major Blykes. From your perspective, sure, Santos acknowledged. From ours, it's just Tuesday, which brings us to our actual proposal. She gestured, and the hologram shifted to display what appeared to be a treaty document. We'd like to formally end this misunderstanding and establish normal diplomatic relations. We'll provide reparations for the ships we've damaged, technical assistance with rebuilding, and we'll even throw in some mining rights to the asteroids that started this whole mess. In exchange for? Vex-9 asked suspiciously. Nothing, Harrison replied. Consider it an apology for the confusion and a gesture of good faith between neighbors. Elena stared at the treaty terms displayed before them. The humans were offering to pay for the privilege of ending a war they'd been winning decisively. It was either the most magnanimous gesture in galactic history or the most elaborate insult ever devised. There has to be a catch, Captain Zola 8 said. Nobody offers terms this generous to an enemy they've defeated. You're not our enemy, General Santos replied simply. You're our neighbor who we had a misunderstanding with. There's a difference. But you could destroy us, Lieutenant Keeks pointed out. Your capabilities far exceed our own. Could and would are very different things, Harrison said. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. That's kind of the whole point of civilization, isn't it? For the first time since this whole nightmare began, Vex-9 felt something that might have been hope. These humans, these impossible, over-engineered survivors from a death world, weren't conquerors. They were neighbors with a very different perspective on conflict resolution. "I'll need to consult with the Federation Council," he said finally. Of course, Santos nodded. "Take all the time you need. We'll maintain current positions and continue avoiding unnecessary casualties while you deliberate." "One more question," Elena interrupted. "If this was all a misunderstanding, why didn't you just explain that earlier?" Harrison and Santos exchanged another look, and both began laughing. "We tried," Harrison said between chuckles. "But every time we sent a diplomatic message, you responded by shooting at us. Eventually we figured we'd have to get your attention first. And the best way to get our attention was to systematically demonstrate that we couldn't win." Vex-9 asked. "Well, yeah," Harrison replied, as if it were obvious. "How else were we supposed to convince you that fighting wasn't in your best interests? Strongly worded letters?" The communication ended, leaving the Federation officers alone with their thoughts and the staggering realization that they'd been trying to fight a war against a species that thought warfare was a regrettable but occasionally necessary form of communication. Elena looked around the room at her fellow officers, all of whom appeared to be processing the same impossible truth. They hadn't been defeated by a superior military force. They'd been gently but firmly corrected by neighbors who were trying to prevent a misunderstanding from becoming a tragedy. "Well," Vex-9 said finally, his voice mixing exhaustion with grudging admiration, "I guess we should probably accept their terms and try to pretend this never happened." "Sir," Elena said quietly, "I don't think we're going to be able to pretend this never happened. The entire galaxy is going to want to know how we managed to accidentally start a war with a species that could have ended us at any time but chose not to." "Great," Vex-9 muttered. "We're going to be the laughingstock of galactic civilization. The species that picked a fight with the universe's ultimate survivors and then got shown mercy. Or," Elena suggested with a small smile, "we could be the species that made first contact with humanity and lived to tell about it. I have a feeling that's going to be a much rarer achievement than we initially thought." As the Federation officers began the process of drafting their response to the human treaty offer, one thought echoed through each of their minds. Somewhere out there in the galaxy were billions of humans, each one a product of evolution's most ambitious experiment in survival engineering. And they'd decided that diplomacy was preferable to conquest. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all, and humanity, apparently, was the punchline.